Hi everyone, Novels Wonderland here. Welcome back to the channel.
Welcome to Novels Wonderland. OPM Reborn is King, Infinite 8 Gates, Chapter 164 to 180, Chapter 165. Do you still intend to carry out your absolute evil? 1135 words. Chapter 165. Do you still intend to carry out your absolute evil? At this moment, Garou had been charred beyond recognition, a blackened mass of charcoal. It looked as though a layer of obsidian skin had been plated over him. Can you still talk? Hey! King shook him a couple of times and realized that while Garou didn't respond, he was still very much alive. This kid is seriously tenacious. Even King couldn't help but marvel. First, he endured a savage beating, then he was nearly incinerated into carbon, yet he refused to die. In fact, refused to die was an understatement. It was more like the kid was fundamentally fine. Garou looked miserable on the surface, but a massive reservoir of life force was hidden deep within his foundations. Unless he was vaporized in a single hit, he would keep triggering that life force to grow even stronger. King began funneling his crimson aura into Garou's body. Under King's precise control, the energy became gentle and revitalizing, systematically repairing the youth's mangled frame. The charred crust on his body began to crack, revealing smooth, new skin underneath. Vitality can heal others. This was a discovery King had made during his recent experiments. Ever since defeating Boros, King had been testing the limits of his various abilities. He had discovered several utility functions, such as the soul possession trick he just used and the fact that his aura could act as a potent medicine. Perhaps because King possessed the extreme regeneration talent, his aura carried a massive amount of life energy alongside its destructive power. Under the continuous aura treatment, Garou's breathing stabilized. His yellow pupils fluttered open. Where am I? After a brief moment of disorientation, Garou snapped to his senses. His eyes widened as he looked at King in shock. I'm alive. Did we beat that god bastard? King nodded. Yeah, you're alive. That thing has been driven out of your body. He won't be invading this world again anytime soon. I see. Garou looked down, processing the information, but then he noticed his surroundings and lost his cool. What is all this sparkling stuff? Am I in freaking outer space? He instinctively tried to hold his breath because, according to what he remembered from school, space had no oxygen. But he immediately realized he could breathe just fine. He noticed a thin barrier of aura surrounding him, trapping a pocket of breathable air. Garou felt a wave of profound weakness in his soul and clenched his fists. Having experienced the godlike power of the possessed vessel, returning to his mortal, weak self felt incredibly jarring. He looked around, his voice uncertain. By the way, where exactly are we? Is that big glowing ball over there the sun? Naive Garou assumed that even if they were in space, they were still within the solar system. King's expression soured slightly. To be honest, he didn't even know where that bastard god had teleported them, but he was certain it wasn't the solar system. Fortunately, he had left an energy signature on the bald demon Saitama. He could track that mark and tear through space to get back. This isn't the solar system, King replied, shaking his head. We are in a region of space incredibly far from Earth. Returning through normal means would take ages. Garou froze. Wait, we're out of the solar system? Then how do we get home? He racked his brain for the scraps of science he learned in school. The fastest speed was light speed, right? And even at light speed, it took 8 minutes to get from the sun to Earth. And we're even further away than that. Does that mean we're going to be stuck here forever? Seeing the panic in Garou's eyes, King interrupted him. If you're worrying about how to get back, don't. I just need to tear space open, and we can use the chaotic currents to reach Earth directly. King didn't want to waste more time talking. He grabbed Garou by the collar and plunged his right hand into the void ahead. With a burst of violent power, the space in front of King was forcibly ripped in half, revealing a jagged, shimmering silver rift. King closed his eyes, his will searching through the vast cosmos until he locked onto a faint, distant energy trail. He hoisted the shielded Garou and leaped into the spatial rift. Facing the razor-sharp spatial currents inside, King didn't bother with an active defense. After nullifying the most dangerous surges, he let the remaining spatial blades lash against his body. After hundreds of cuts, the spatial turbulence became negligible to him. The blades only left faint white marks on his skin. This allowed him to divert almost all his power to protecting Garou, ensuring the kid didn't get accidentally shredded into confetti. The world was a spinning blur. King could handle the disorientation, but Garou, even with the aura shield, was seeing stars and felt like his stomach was doing backflips. After about 10 minutes of sprinting through the chaotic void, King's perception of the energy mark peaked. Looks like we've arrived. King threw a punch upward, tearing a hole in the dimension, and leaped out of the turbulence with Garou in tow. Staring at the beautiful blue planet before them, King floated in the void with a faint smile. We're back. As for his passenger, King looked down at the pale, nauseous Garou and asked, "So, do you still intend to carry out your path of absolute evil?" Garou felt like a victim of severe motion sickness who had just stepped off a 24-hour bus ride. His stomach was churning, and waves of vertigo assaulted his brain. Despite that, he forced a smirk and looked up at King. Of course. This genius will uphold absolute evil to the end. I'm going to defeat the other heroes to show them that heroes aren't the only ones meant to win. When Garou spoke, he pointedly emphasized other heroes, making it clear he wasn't including the man standing in front of him. It wasn't just because King saved him from God. There was a much more practical reason. I can't beat him. Garou had seen everything from the mental space. He knew that even if he mastered the water stream rock-smashing fist to its ultimate peak, even if he evolved through a dozen life-and-death battles, he could never touch this monster. After all, this was a man who could pin a god to the ground and beat the divinity out of him. 20 advanced chapters now available on Patreon. https://www.patreon.com/c/sega's. Just remove the hyphen to access Patreon normally. If you like this novel, please consider leaving a review. That's helped the story a lot, thank you. Chapter 165, Chapter 166, wait, are you actually serious? 885 words. Chapter 166, wait, are you actually serious? Hearing Garou's answer, King was genuinely taken aback. Are you actually serious? He had only asked casually to see if the recent events and witnessing the hero's efforts to protect the Earth had sparked even a tiny bit of character development in the kid. Instead, you still want to hunt heroes and be the personification of absolute evil? For a moment, King didn't know whether to call him a pure Chinibu teenager or just incredibly thick-headed. After a moment of thought, King offered an alternative. Have you ever considered that defeating heroes in combat isn't the only way to prove you are absolute evil? If you want to show the world you've surpassed every hero, violence isn't the only path. There are other methods, for example, joining the Hero Association and becoming a member of the S-Class. Ha! Garou and King stared at each other. Garou looked like he couldn't process the words. You mean, you want me to join the Hero Association? To be a hero? Yup. After receiving King's confirmation, Garou scratched his head, his brain effectively stalling. What is this guy talking about? Seeing Garou's confusion, King calmly explained his logic. It's simple. S-Class heroes are beings that stand above all others. If you surpass every single S-Class hero and take the rank 1 spot, you have, by definition, defeated all of them. Once you've successfully stood atop the mountain and looked down on every hero in existence, you can then choose to return to your monster identity. At that point, you will naturally be the ultimate absolute evil. What do you think? Well. Garou was stunned by the argument. But the more he thought about it, the more it actually made a twisted kind of sense. I don't have to beat them all up physically. I join them, climb the ranks until I'm the strongest hero at rank 1, and then betray them to become the greatest monster. That's actually a pretty solid plan. This is definitely some kind of trick. Garou finally snapped out of it. He was just about to argue against King's sophistry when he noticed something. A sandbag-sized fist, wreathed in intimidating power, was quietly clenching and unclenching. Garou. He shut his mouth. His martial artist's intuition guaranteed that if he said one more word in opposition, he was going to get a world-class beatdown. They weren't on the ground, they were in deep space. King didn't even need to hit him. He just had to drop the aura shield, and Garou would be dead in a second. Realizing his very life was in this man's hands, and that his life had just been saved by this man, Garou felt incredibly stifled, as if he'd been forced to eat a giant bowl of lemons. On one hand was his ideal. On the other was his savior, his benefactor who prevented him from being erased by a god, and a guy who was currently threatening him with a fist of doom. The image of an old man with silver hair flashed through Garou's mind. The memories were vivid, like an old film reel playing behind his eyes. If I become a hero, the old man would probably be pretty happy. After a long pause, Garou sighed and ruffled his messy white hair in resignation. But let's be clear, once I hit rank 1 in the S-class, I'm definitely turning back into a monster. No questions asked. Sure. Whatever you say. King didn't care about Garou's threats. It didn't matter if the kid could actually reach rank 1. To climb to the top, Garou would have to perform a massive amount of heroic activity. After doing that much good, his perspective on heroes would inevitably change. And if, after all that, he still wanted to break bad? That was even easier to handle. He can choose to face my fist or the bald demon's fist. Just then, a crucial realization hit King. I just remembered. Genos still hasn't registered as a hero yet. King finally remembered his cheap cyborg disciple. In all the chaos, the boy had never actually gone to the association to get his license. I'll take Garou back, and the two of them can go register for the S-class together. After his brush with death and being buffed by God's presence, Garou's physical stats were significantly higher than when he was in prison. King estimated that if Garou and Puri Puri Prisoner had a rematch right now, Garou could probably flatten him in under 10 rounds. A wise decision. Now, let's get back to Earth. With that, King transformed into a crimson streak of light, hurtling forward and diving straight into the atmosphere. Garou remained trapped inside the aura shield, looking like a stray dog caught in a burlap sack, trailing behind King. From a distance, it looked like a red crystal ornament with a tiny white-haired doll inside, bouncing around and seeing stars as they broke the sound barrier. 20 advanced chapters now available on Patreon. https://www.patreon.com/c/sega's. Just remove the hyphen to access Patreon normally. If you like this novel, please consider leaving a review. That's helped the story a lot, thank you. Chapter 166, Chapter 167, What kind of ultimate sis? 1,247 words. Chapter 167, What kind of ultimate siscon is this? Earth, City Z ruins. Zombie Man, now fully reconstructed, found a scrap of torn cloth to wrap around his waist. He squatted atop a pile of rubble, staring at the carnage with a look of pure exasperation while smoking a cigarette. As he looked at the row of S-class heroes laid out in front of him, his headache worsened. What a mess! How did everyone end up horizontal like this? After Solar Sperm's rampage, every S-class hero on the field had sustained catastrophic injuries. Most were completely incapacitated. Ironically, Zombie Man, who had been the first to have his entire upper body vaporized, was the only S-class hero currently standing, thanks to his specialized regenerative biology. A pile of cigarette butt sat by his feet. He had clearly gone through several packs while waiting for the dust to settle. Zombie Man scratched his head and glanced at his phone. The signal was dead. He clicked his tongue in annoyance. Why is the service so trash? The residual energy from the various God-tier combatants was still scrambling the local atmosphere. Plus, King and God's clash in the upper atmosphere had accidentally shredded several orbital satellites. City Z was currently a communications black hole. Any outgoing messages were struggling to bypass the interference. Zombie Man had to redial dozens of times before finally getting a weak connection to the Hero Association. He barked orders for a mass deployment of medical evacuation teams before turning his attention to his fallen comrades. Tornado of Terror, Tatsumaki Psychic Overload. She was currently in a deep coma, suffering from internal trauma and massive blood loss. Superalloy Darkshine, his state was particularly pathetic. His proud, massive muscles were shredded and soaked in blood. Cracks spiderwebbed across his body like a broken porcelain doll. The most jarring part? His black skin was still shimmering with a bright luster even while he lay there broken, his body attempting a slow, natural recovery. Flashy flash, completely unconscious and at death's door. His breathing was so shallow it was almost non-existent. Silver Fong, bang after taking a heavy blow from Solar Sperm, the old master was out cold, his body unable to sustain the fight. Atomic Samurai, a single punch had almost turned him into a human donut. If he hadn't managed to intercept the blow with his blade at the last millisecond, he would have been vaporized. He lay in the ruins, heavily mangled. Pig God, relatively light injuries. He was currently replenishing his nutritional reserves by inhaling massive amounts of snacks. Zombie Man had no idea where the man kept finding food in a cratered city, but as long as he was okay, it didn't matter. Pori prisoner. Zombie Man's eye twitched as he looked at the prisoner. Despite being covered in blood and deeply unconscious, prisoner's face wore a bashful, blushing expression as he curled up in a delicate fetal position. Zombie Man quickly looked away. Then, there was Tank Top Master. Zombie Man stared at the 4-foot-tall muscle dwarf lying in the dirt. He vaguely remembered hearing about a specific first aid method for this particular hero. Recalling the instructions, Zombie Man stepped forward. He reached down, pinched the strap of Tank Top Master's blue tank top, pulled it back, and let it go. The elastic snapped back with a resonant, rubbery sound. A miracle occurred. Tank Top Master's injuries began to knit together at a visible rate. In a heartbeat, his wounds closed, his fractured bones reassembled, and new skin grew over the scars. But the cost was obvious. Looking down at the hero, who was now barely a meter tall, Zombie Man rubbed his nose awkwardly. Well, he's alive. He'll understand. As for Watchdog Man, Zombie Man spat out his cigarette butt and lit another. Through the rising smoke, he watched the white furry creature sitting on all fours, currently using a hind leg to scratch its ear. Watchdog Man had taken very little damage. Or rather, he was just that strong. Throughout the entire ordeal, he had barely been touched. He was just exhausted and looked a bit dusty. Zombie Man's gaze drifted to a small boy lying flat on his back. Child Emperor's various mechanical gadgets had been reduced to scrap. Fortunately, the boy himself was physically unharmed. The flame-wreathed monster apparently hadn't intended to kill a child, a small mercy in a disaster. But when he saw the guy lying next to Child Emperor, Zombie Man actually felt bad. Can that even be fixed? Drive Knight had been bisected. A casual strike from Solar Sperm had detonated his entire lower chassis. Only his massive, scarlet mechanical eye continued to rotate slowly. His vocoder flickered with sparks, trying to process speech, but no sound came out. The hardware was too damaged to even emit static. Suddenly, Zombie Man frowned. He noticed something. Where is Metal Bat? He scanned the perimeter and spotted a trail of blood droplets leading away from the center of the ruins, extending into the distance. Is that kid trying to be a tough guy again? Zombie Man's expression darkened. He knew that for a 16-year-old like Metal Bat, pride was everything. The boy was likely pushing himself beyond his limits to prove a point, even when he was clearly at his breaking point. Confirming the other heroes were stable for now, Zombie Man broke into a run, following the blood trail. He sprinted through the ruins, weaving around broken buildings and over mountains of rubble, his eyes locked on the crimson stains on the ground. On a shattered road that was barely recognizable, Zombie Man finally caught up. Metal Bat's back was toward him. He was swaying violently, leaning heavily on a bat that was bent and nearly snapped in two. He was dragging one leg, forcing himself forward one agonizing step at a time. With every step, blood dripped from his chin onto the asphalt. His red shirt was now a deep, soaked crimson. Metal Bat. You're heavily injured. I'm taking you back for medical attention. Zombie Man shouted as he ran, but Metal Bat didn't turn around. He just kept limping forward as if he were trying to reach the edge of the world. Something is wrong. Zombie Man dashed forward and grabbed Metal Bat by the shoulder, forcing him to a halt. He circled around to the front, ready to scold the boy, but he froze. You. From Zombie Man's perspective, Metal Bat's eyes were completely rolled back into his head. Blood was gushing from a scalp wound, and his muscles were vibrating with tremors. The boy was out cold. This is... Based on Zombie Man's extensive experience with dying, he knew for a fact that Metal Bat had lost consciousness long ago. So how is he still moving? Then, Zombie Man noticed Metal Bat's lips moving. He was muttering something in a faint, raspy whisper. Zombie Man leaned in close. The words were like a dream delirium, barely audible over the wind. Zenko's piano competition, can't miss it. She'll be so angry. Wait, what? Zombie Man's eyes widened. He couldn't believe his ears. You mean to tell me you're pushing through a fatal injury, operating on pure instinct after losing consciousness, all because you don't want to miss your sister's piano recital? Just what kind of ultimate siscon are you? 20 advanced chapters now available on Patreon. https://www.patreon.com/c/sega's. Just remove the hyphen to access Patreon normally. If you like this novel, please consider leaving a review. That's helped the story a lot, thank you. Chapter 167, Chapter 168, solved that quickly? 724 words. Chapter 168, solved that quickly? Metal Bat's strength suddenly spiked. With a violent jerk, he threw off Zombie Man's hand. The murmurs that had sounded like a dream delirium turned into a full-throated roar. I have to go. I have to see Zenko's piano recital. Zombie Man was caught off guard and stumbled back, a look of weary resignation crossing his pale face. Give it a rest and stay calm. He raised his massive custom handgun and slammed the heavy metal grip hard against the back of Metal Bat's neck. With the crisp sound of impact, Metal Bat's head snapped forward, and he collapsed. Only a faint, shallow breath proved he was still among the living. Metal Bat's body had reached its absolute breaking point long ago, only his obsession with his sister's competition had been fueling his forward momentum. Zombie Man's strike was simply the final straw that allowed the boy's exhausted system to finally shut down. At least he's finally quiet. Zombie Man leaned down, hoisted the unconscious Metal Bat onto his back, and began to run toward the center of the battlefield. Even with a 100-pound teenager on his shoulders, his speed easily eclipsed any Olympic sprinter. He covered 100 meters in mere seconds. While Zombie Man's raw physical power was considered low by S-class standards, that was only in comparison to monsters like Darkshine. In reality, his body was hardened beyond human limits. He could bend steel bars with his bare hands. In the A-class tier, his physical stats would have been top of the line, to say nothing of his limitless stamina. Minutes later, he arrived at the makeshift ward. He laid Metal Bat down at the far right of the row of fallen S-class heroes and wiped a drop of sweat from his forehead. Looking at the 10 S-class heroes laid out on the ground, Zombie Man felt a bizarre sense of absurdity. Why does this feel like I'm trying to collect them all? Just then, a streak of crimson light descended from the heavens. It landed as light as a feather, not even kicking up a speck of dust. King's figure manifested from within the aura. He had already deactivated the Gate of Death, returning to his usual, imposing appearance as he touched down on Earth. He waved a hand, dissolving the aura shield. Garu, who had been tumbling around inside the sphere like a frantic squirrel, was finally liberated. He hit the ground with a wet thud. The moment he landed, Garu didn't even look at his surroundings. He scrambled onto his hands and knees and began to vomit violently. Blegurg! It was like being stuck in a high-speed spin cycle for 1,000 rounds. Ugh! Garu looked completely drained, his stomach doing somersaults from the disorientation. Zombie Man glanced at Garu, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. Who is this kid? He looks. Zombieman's first instinct was to go on guard. There were 10 crippled S-class heroes lying here, any reasonably strong entity could slaughter them all in seconds. But then he remembered King had brought him back. If King trusted him, there was no reason to worry. After all, if it hadn't been for King, they would have all been wiped out the moment the flame-wreathed monster, Solar Sperm, appeared. Thinking of the two terrifying entities, the mastermind and the golden monster that had dismantled the S-class Zombieman's heart hammered with anxiety. Those two monsters. Don't worry. They've been dealt with. Saitama and I finished them off. Solved. Zombie-Man froze. He had assumed King had merely driven them off or stalled them. These were beings capable of wiping out the entire S-class in a heartbeat. From the moment King appeared to save them to the moment he returned from the void, it had been barely 30 minutes. In that moment, Zombieman's understanding of King's power level underwent a seismic shift. We can talk about the details later, King said, noticing the incredibly weak life signatures of the 10 heroes on the ground. He frowned deeply. They are in critical condition. It's been this long, why hasn't the Hero Association sent a medical evacuation team yet? 20 advanced chapters now available on Patreon. https://www.patreon.com/c/sega's. Just remove the hyphen to access Patreon normally. If you like this novel, please consider leaving a review. That's helped the story a lot, thank you. Chapter 168, Chapter 169, What Did You Do to Me? 1017 words. Chapter 169, What Did You Do to Me? Hearing King's confusion, Zombie-Man let out a weary, bitter chuckle. King, you might not know, but the signal in this entire region is almost completely dead. I had to redial dozens of times just to get through to the Hero Association. The rescue teams are on their way, but it'll take time. I see. King glanced at the only 3 S-class heroes still able to move. A flicker of respect passed through his eyes. The S-class heroes present were all-powerful individuals, yet they were willing to fight to the death to protect humanity. That kind of spirit was truly commendable. You've all worked hard. King's deep, baritone voice rumbled near Zombieman's ear. The detective froze mid-inhale, the cigarette dangling from his lips falling to the ground and sending up a few sparks. A wave of warmth flowed through Zombieman's heart. He smiled, his red eyes looking at the man who had just saved the world. You really are a man of immense charm. In Zombieman's eyes, a hero like King, possessing godlike power while still deeply empathizing with the people, was a rare breed. He wasn't a normal human, he was an immortal experiment who had escaped the House of Evolution, a literal humanoid monster. Because of this, Zombie-Man held those with noble character in the highest regard. His words were meant as the ultimate validation of King's character. However, upon hearing this, King's expression became slightly unnatural. Sounds a bit ambiguous. I'm sure he didn't mean it like that. These S-class heroes had just risked their lives to save Earth. King felt he shouldn't be maliciously misinterpreting their words. Just as King was about to reply, Zombie-Man spoke again. He lit a fresh cigarette, his smile as warm as a spring breeze. Kind, domineering, and powerful. If I were a woman, I might have actually fallen for you, Mr. King. King. What the hell is wrong with you? They chatted for a few more minutes, mostly exchanging info on what had happened on their respective battlefields. Suddenly, King noticed that the life signatures of several fallen heroes were beginning to fade further. He waved a hand to end the conversation. He stepped forward and crouched in front of Tatsumaki. Looking at the petite, broken girl, he placed his hand over her forehead. Based on the situation in City Z, it'll be a while before the medics arrive. I'll handle the stabilization. As he spoke, King's palm began to glow with a deep, crimson light. Vitality-filled aura erupted from his hand, flowing steadily into Tatsumaki's body. Zombie-Man, watching from the side, was stunned. As someone who died and resurrected for a living, Zombie-Man had an extraordinary perception of life force. He immediately noticed that the moment the red light appeared, Tatsumaki's breathing stabilized, and her condition began to take a turn for the better. King even knows healing arts. What a mysterious man. Just how many secrets are you hiding? Ignoring Zombieman's inquisitive gaze, King focused entirely on Tatsumaki's condition, projecting his will into her body. Brain trauma is significant backlash from psychic overload. The body is mostly fine, just superficial wounds, but her small frame couldn't handle that much blood loss. After a full diagnostic scan, King began the treatment. His aura surged through her system, bringing a torrent of life force wherever it went. Tatsumaki's torn tissues began to knit together, and the pained, tightened expression on her face, caused by the agonizing mental feedback, started to relax. The treatment lasted for about a minute. Tatsumaki's breathing was now deep and steady. Her exquisite face was calm, the lines of agony finally smoothed away. She should wake up soon. I've healed the physical damage. However, life is full of unexpected timing. King hadn't expected her recovery to be so rapid. Or rather, Tatsumaki had already been on the verge of waking, kept under only by the sheer exhaustion of her mind. While King was still crouched over her, hand on her head, leaning in close to check for any residual sequelae, after effects, in her nervous system. A certain green-haired lowly's fingers twitched. Then, she slowly drifted back to consciousness. Her long lashes fluttered, and her emerald eyes blinked open. Tatsumaki felt as if she were soaking in a warm hot spring. She felt cozy and safe. What's going on? Did I die and go to heaven? What happened to that monster wreathed in gold flames? During the previous battle, Tatsumaki had passed out before King arrived. She had no idea he had saved the day. Why does it feel like there's something pressing against my forehead? Because she had just woken up, her brain was still foggy. She instinctively tried to shake off whatever was touching her head. King noticed the movement and thought something was wrong. Is she having a seizure? Is the psychic backlash recurring? Thinking this, King leaned in even closer, pouring his will into her to find the source of the problem. Tatsumaki shook her head twice, realized she couldn't shake the pressure, and frowned. What is it? She snapped her eyes wide open. The first thing she saw was the sunlight piercing through the dust clouds. The second thing she saw was a fierce, scarred, domineering face, mere inches from her own. Eh ha 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 ha. In an instant, Tatsumaki shrieked in terror. Driven by raw reflex, she used a burst of psychokinesis to rocket herself dozens of meters away. She stared blankly at Zombie Man, who was watching the show with amusement, and then at King, who was still crouching there, looking genuinely confused. Her face turned a violent shade of red. It was a mix of embarrassment and explosive fury. You damn Scarface. You lecherous, perverted, sexually frustrated creep. What were you doing to me while I was asleep? King? Zombie Man, Carrot O Carrot. 20 advanced chapters now available on Patreon. https://www.patreon.com/c/sega's. Just remove the hyphen to access Patreon normally. If you like this novel, please consider leaving a review. That's helped the story a lot, thank you. Chapter 169, Chapter 170, I have learned much. 866 words. Chapter 170, I have learned much. Looking at Tatsumaki, whose face was flushed with a mix of embarrassment and explosive fury, King felt a wave of helplessness. One look was all it took to know that the little girl's mind had gone in a completely wrong direction. While Tatsumaki certainly had her charms, and her petite stature could easily trigger a protective instinct in some, King had zero interest in children. He waved his hand dismissively. His face showed no irritation or anger at being misunderstood. He maintained his domineering, majestic composure, and his voice remained steady. Tatsumaki, I meant no offense. I was simply healing your injuries. That is all. Hearing King's explanation, Tatsumaki's emotions began to settle. Only now did she realize that despite the horrific wounds she had sustained earlier, she now felt full of energy and didn't feel a shred of pain. This King guy, he even has the power to heal others. Tatsumaki realized she had indeed jumped to conclusions. She lowered her head in embarrassment, but her tsundere nature made it nearly impossible for her to simply admit she was wrong. However, facing King's calm, bottomless gaze, she finally crossed her arms awkwardly and muttered in a tiny whisper, "I'm sorry." Seeing her like this, King felt a sudden urge to tease the brat. He cupped his ear and tilted his head. "What was that, Tatsumaki? You're talking too quietly. I can't hear you." Tatsumaki knew exactly what he was doing. She glanced around to ensure no one but Zombie Man was listening, took a deep breath, and raised her voice slightly. "I said I'm sorry. Still can't hear you." I said I'm sorry." Seeing Tatsumaki shouting her apology with a face as red as a tomato, King nodded in satisfaction. Teasing kids is actually pretty good for stress relief. Now, it was time to wake the others. Over the next few minutes, King moved down the line, healing the heavily injured S-Class heroes one by one as they drifted back to consciousness. When Super Ally Darkshine woke up, he stared silently at his mangled, torn muscles. The oily black sheen of his skin actually seemed to fade. Seeing King beside him, Darkshine hesitated several times, but ultimately didn't dare to speak. "My muscles are broken. I've lost my pride. What right do I have to even speak to Mr. Before this?" Darkshine had frequently boasted of being one of the association's big three you must never provoke. All of that confidence was anchored entirely in his perfect muscles. Now that his defense had been breached, his unparalleled self-esteem seemed to wither away. Suddenly, Darkshine felt the light in front of him being blocked. "Even my future has turned dark now that I've lost my muscles." He subconsciously looked up, but he didn't see a dark future. He saw a tall, golden-haired man looking down at him. You are lost in doubt." King's words cut Darkshine off. Those 4 precise words were like a blade, piercing through the giant's fragile, crumbling psyche. He lowered his head deeply, his expression desolate. As one of the heroes who genuinely admired King, he didn't want to hide his shame. "Yes, mister, I admit it. My proud muscles were torn apart like paper. The enemy was so much stronger than me, can I really trust my muscles anymore?" Earlier, his confidence was absolute because he believed his muscles could tank anything. Now that they had reached their breaking point, his mind had followed suit. Facing Darkshine's confession, King simply shook his head. He placed a hand on the hero's mountain-like trapezius muscle and spoke with absolute gravity. "You are wrong about one thing. Your muscles are far from useless." Then, King began a session of guided enlightenment. "King, think for a moment. Who was the mastermind behind this crisis?" "Darkshine, the mastermind? It was that god person you held back." "King, correct. And tell me, has that god been driven out by me? Did we kick him off the earth? Are we the victors, or not?" "Darkshine, yes, we achieved the final victory. The invading god was driven away. But..." "King, then there you have it. Humanity won. We defeated a god. And since you are a human, you also achieved victory in this battle. Meanwhile, God is the loser." Darkshine froze. He began to grasp the King logic being woven for him. A spark of life returned to his eyes. "You mean?" King nodded. Looking at Darkshine's expression, he knew the stat monster was taking the bait. "You are the winner. God is the loser. Therefore, Super Alloy Darkshine God." As those words left King's mouth, Darkshine's muscles seemed to regain their oily luster instantly. His aura surged, and the desolate pain on his face vanished, replaced by an expression of pure, dark-shining ecstasy. "So that's how it is. I have learned much. 20 advanced chapters now available on Patreon. https://www.patreon.com/c/sega's. Just remove the hyphen to access Patreon normally. If you like this novel, please consider leaving a review. That's helped the story a lot, thank you. Chapter 170, Chapter 171, What Are You Doing? 1199 words. Chapter 171, What Are You Doing? As Super Ally Dark Shine, whose life force was among the strongest, regained consciousness, the other S-Class heroes slowly began to wake up as well. Bang looked out over the wasteland that used to be City Z. His aged eyes were filled with worry as he gazed toward the outskirts, his fists tightening involuntarily. Sharanko. His dojo was located on the edge of City Z, but looking at the landscape now, the mountain where the dojo stood had likely been flattened by the shockwaves of the battle. I hope that boy managed to escape. If it were just the destruction of the dojo, Bang would merely feel heartache and resignation. But if Sharanko had been killed by the collateral damage, Bang knew he would spend the rest of his years drowning in agony and guilt. He wouldn't blame Sharanko for being weak, he would only blame his own insignificance and incompetence for failing to protect him from the enemy. Flashy Flash sat silently on the ground, his long golden hair draped over his cheeks, looking utterly defeated. He recalled the battle before he passed out. That monster, shimmering with diamond luster, had effortlessly crushed him in the realm of speed. To Flashy Flash, who had always taken supreme pride in his velocity, this was a devastating insult. But that wasn't even the worst part. The most humiliating detail was that the shimmering monster hadn't even been in its final form. According to the other heroes, the creature had evolved again later, reaching a level of power that made its previous state look like a joke. My speed was crushed that easily. Just as Flashy Flash was sinking into a pit of depression, a pig-like squeal of terror caught his attention. Why am I only a meter tall? I'm not even as tall as your damn thighs. High-pitched mosquito voice. HM? Where is that squeaky voice coming from? Flashy Flash looked up in confusion, only to see a tiny, muscular dwarf wearing an oversized blue tank top jumping up and down in rage. Though the person's face had become very youthful and chibi, Flashy Flash recognized the identity of this little person by the old-fashioned blue tank top and the signature blonde hair. Is that Tank Top Master? Flashy Flash then noticed that while Tank Top Master was covered in blood, he didn't actually seem to have many injuries. Did he use some sort of forbidden secret technique? Coming from a ninja background, Flashy Flash knew the world contained many esoteric arts. Perhaps there was a technique that restored health by burning away physical height and mass? On the other side of the ruins, King was observing the S-Class heroes as they woke up. Simultaneously, his spiritual perception constantly swept in all directions. After all, God had only been driven away, not truly killed. He needed to maintain a high level of vigilance in case the entity attempted a sudden return. These S-Class heroes were at their breaking point and couldn't handle another round of combat. Caution was the only option. What is that? His spiritual scan detected something plummeting from an altitude of 10,000 meters at terminal velocity. King snapped his head up, his gaze turning solemn. And the energy fluctuation is massive. Just as King was about to reopen the gate of death to intercept the threat, he suddenly sensed a familiar aura within that rapidly approaching energy spike. It's just the bald demon. King sat back down, the tension on his face vanishing instantly. Saitama was, in many ways, the very definition of absolute security. There's another massive energy source right next to him. King focused his perception, and his eyebrows shot up. Solar sperm? The caped baldy didn't kill him, but brought him back to Earth instead? I guess the convergence of timelines is truly a sight to behold. It even managed to fix this. King remembered that in the original story, Saitama had taken black sperm in as a pet, but that only happened because the monster had been reduced to a pathetic, weakened state. But the current solar sperm showed no signs of being weakened. He still possessed godlike strength capable of effortlessly one-shotting the entire S-Class. And he still turned him into a pet? King didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He could only sigh and conclude, as expected of Saitama. A streak of light wrapped in flames descended from the heavens. The moment it hit the ground, a wall of dust and debris exploded into the air. A thunderous roar accompanied by an invisible shockwave swept across the ruins. The S-Class heroes immediately forgot about resting. They all turned toward the impact site with strained expressions, mobilizing their remaining power for a final stand. As the dust settled, a tall figure wreathed in roaring golden flames was revealed. It was indeed solar sperm. Instantly, the faces of every hero turned pale. They went into full alert mode. Metal Bat, ignoring his broken body, grabbed his bat and charged forward with a manic, blood-soaked face. Tank Top Master, despite being a 3-foot-tall dwarf, grit his teeth and crossed his arms over his chest. He broke into a sprint, his voice letting out a high-pitched roar. Tank Top Tackle. The moment Tatsumaki saw Solar Sperm, a murderous rage erupted in her eyes. Her psychokinesis poured out like a screaming ocean, transforming into a sky full of psychic spikes. You dare come back? Die, you filthy animal. Zombie Man first looked at King. Noticing that the strongest man on Earth showed no sign of shock or alarm, Zombie Man's brow furrowed briefly before he understood. So even Solar Sperm's return was within Mr. King's calculations. In that case, there was no need to interfere. King's plan didn't require his meddling. Watchdog Man looked at Solar Sperm, then at the composed King. He lowered his head nonchalantly and went back to scratching his ear with his hind leg. Pig God likewise observed King's reaction. Realizing there was no danger, he continued to shove snacks into his mouth to replenish his energy. In the end, only 3 S-Class heroes launched an immediate attack: Metal Bat, Tank Top Master, and Tatsumaki. The common denominator between these 3 at this moment was that they were all currently lacking in the rational thinking department. Tank Top Master's brain capacity seemed to have shrunk along with his body. He hadn't bothered to check King's reaction. Metal Bat was simply running on pure adrenaline and fighting spirit, remembering the humiliation of being one-shot earlier. As for Tatsumaki, she was driven by pure, unadulterated fury over Solar Sperm's previous taunts and his brutal treatment of Blast. She attacked without a single second of thought. Solar Sperm, who had just been brought back to Earth by his new master, Saitama, barely had time to blink before 3 lethal attacks closed in on him. He was utterly confused. What the hell are you guys doing? 20 advanced chapters now available on Patreon. https://www.patreon.com/c/sega's. Just remove the hyphen to access Patreon normally. If you like this novel, please consider leaving a review. That's helped the story a lot, thank you. Chapter 171, Chapter 172, He's Actually a Pet Now? 913 words. Chapter 172, He's Actually a Pet Now? Returning to Earth only to see 3 maggot-tier runts trying to jump him almost made Solar Sperm laugh out loud. A single glance was all it took to recognize them. These S-Class heroes were the same weaklings he had casually swatted aside earlier. In Solar Sperm's eyes, both Tatsumaki and Metal Bat were in the same league, weaklings he could slap to death at his leisure. I haven't even made a move yet, and these ants dare to initiate an attack on me? Solar Sperm instinctively moved to retaliate, but his raised hand froze mid-air. I absolutely cannot fight back, or I'll be slapped into the next life. Before his hand had moved even a millimeter, he felt 2 predatory glares locking onto him. One gaze came from his newly acknowledged master, and current Big Daddy, the bald demon Saitama. The other came from a tall, blond man standing silently in the distance. Even with a stoic expression, that majestic, scarred face made the monster's soul shiver with dread. If he acted now, he'd be instantly deleted by these 2 monsters. Thinking of this, Solar Sperm didn't dare budge. He simply stood there, bracing to let the combined assault of Tatsumaki, Metal Bat, and Tank Top Master wash over him. But just then, the dust was cleared by a casual, light-handed slap. A shiny bald head reflected the sunlight with a blinding glare. What's with all the dust? Is there a demolition crew working here, or is the air pollution just as bad as they say on TV? Only now did the heroes see clearly. Standing right next to Solar Sperm was a man they all recognized. One Punch Man, Saitama. Saitama looked up just in time to see Metal Bat and Tank Top Master charging his way, along with a sky full of psychic spikes. Wait, why is he here? Tank Top Master and Metal Bat both turned pale. They had put everything into their charge, and they were already too close to abort. What gives? I know you're happy to see me, but this is a bit much. Are you trying to hug me or tackle me? Saitama grumbled. With one hand, he effortlessly caught the head of Metal Bat's high-velocity bat. With one foot, he braced against the charging tank top master, stopping the tiny hero in his tracks. Then, he simply exhaled a sharp breath. A violent hurricane manifested instantly, its unrivaled wind pressure pulverizing Tatsumaki's psychic spikes into nothingness. In a single instant, the combined offensive of three S-class heroes was neutralized. Seeing Saitama step in to shield him, Solar Sperm let out a massive sigh of relief in his heart. It wasn't that he feared the damage. Even if their attacks had landed, they wouldn't have caused him a single point of damage. The difference in their power scales was too vast. Despite being beaten by Saitama in the cosmos, he was still a genuine god-level entity. Tatsumaki didn't even rank at the top of the dragon above tier, let alone reach his level. The issue was his standing. If Solar Sperm let their attacks hit him, it would be a massive humiliation and a sign that Saitama didn't value him. If he endured it now, it would only lead to more bullying later. After all, he had beaten nearly every S-class hero to a pulp earlier, and they definitely held a grudge. But if he fought back, Saitama and King would step in and turn him into a pile of cosmic sludge. Therefore, Saitama stopping the fight was the perfect outcome. It proved Saitama valued his pet and prevented Solar Sperm from accidentally picking the wrong side. Seeing Saitama protecting a former enemy, the S-class heroes felt a wave of suspicion. Throughout the entire war, they hadn't seen the supposedly bottomless strength of One Punch Man even once. He had effectively vanished into thin air. Don't tell me. Has One Punch Man defected to the monsters? The hot-headed metal bat was ready to bark a demand for an explanation, but before he could open his mouth, King's deep voice resonated across the ruins. Lower your guard. Saitama has tamed him. Solar Sperm is no longer an enemy, he is One Punch Man's new pet. Ha! Tatsumaki's eyes widened to the size of saucers. She stared at Saitama's shiny head in utter disbelief. This guy, tamed that monster wreathed in gold flames? Is he insane? As a witness to the carnage, Tatsumaki knew exactly how powerful Solar Sperm was. Even as the queen of psychokinesis, she had been powerless against him, getting one shot with ease. Most importantly, in her heart, the legendary and mysterious Blast had also been defeated by this monster. Solar Sperm was an entity of extreme, world-ending power. And you're telling me this boiled egg bald guy just turned him into a pet? But as the thought crossed her mind, her skepticism hit a wall. Tatsumaki remembered her own spar with Saitama. The memory was still vivid and painful. No matter what she did, she couldn't scratch him. He had defeated her as easily as if he were playing a game. If it's this guy, and King, then maybe beating that monster really is. 20 advanced chapters now available on Patreon. https://www.patreon.com/c/sega. Just remove the hyphen to access Patreon normally. If you like this novel, please consider leaving a review. That's helped the story a lot. Thank you. Chapter 172, Chapter 173, They Are True Heroes. 1,109 words. Chapter 173, They Are True Heroes. In the end, the S-class heroes had no choice but to accept the reality. Saitama, the One Punch Man, had used nothing but a few casual slaps to beat Solar Sperm, the creature that had effortlessly dismantled the entire S-class, into a state of total submission, ultimately turning him into a house pet. Feeling the hostile glares from the maggots around him, Solar Sperm lowered his head awkwardly. I could literally end all of them with a single fart. Being stared at with such murderous intent by these weaklings, it feels so uncomfortable. Solar Sperm knew exactly why the heroes hated him. After all, he was the one who had nearly beaten them to death minutes ago. After another 10 minutes, the Hero Association's medical evacuation fleet finally arrived. From a lead helicopter, Sitch, with his famously large nose, descended via a fast rope. The moment his feet touched the ground, he began sprinting through the ruins with frantic urgency. His eyes were wide with panic. According to Zombieman's frantic report, the S-class was effectively wiped out. Everyone was critically injured, and several were on the verge of flatlining. Please, you guys have to be okay? The S-class heroes were humanity's ultimate trump card, the final bastion of hope against total extinction. If the entire S-class fell during this crisis, humanity would follow shortly after. However, a tiny sliver of hope remained in Sitch's heart. Zombie Man had reported that one man was notably missing from the list of casualties: King, the strongest man on Earth. He was reportedly holding back the mastermind of the disaster, the entity known as God. As long as the legendary Mr. King is still standing, humanity will not perish. Even if every other S-class hero falls, there is still a chance as long as he remains. This was Sitch's conviction, and it was the world's conviction as well. Finally, his life sign radar picked up a cluster of signatures. Sitch let out a cry of relief, scrambled over a jagged mountain of concrete, and shouted, "Heroes of the Association! Are you all right, eh?" Sitch froze. The medical team behind him froze. They stared at the S-class heroes. Every single one of them looked perfectly healthy, vibrant complexions, steady breathing, and not a single open wound in sight. They didn't look like people who had just been at death's door. After a confusing few minutes of explanation, Sitch's shock only deepened. He felt his entire worldview being dismantled and reassembled into something nonsensical. So every S-class hero was one-shot in an instant by a monster wreathed in gold flames? And then King defeated a god, returned to the battlefield, and instantly healed every single one of you? And most importantly, the monster that one-shot you was then turned into a pet by One Punch Man? The sequence of events hit Sitch's brain like a tidal wave, causing a total mental system failure. He rubbed his large, red nose, his mouth opening and closing as he struggled to find words. Ultimately, he just let out a long, weary sigh. I suppose that's just how strong King is. And his friend, Saitama, is apparently just as absurd. This is a win for humanity, I guess. Realizing the crisis was truly over, Sitch took a deep breath. He looked at the tattered, blood-stained clothes of the S-class heroes with profound respect. He straightened his posture, his expression solemn and sincere, and bowed deeply. On behalf of the Hero Association and the human race, I, Sitch, offer you our most heartfelt gratitude and respect for your desperate struggle for our future. The corner of Tatsumaki's mouth curled up, though she maintained her tsundere persona by waving a hand dismissively. A disaster of this level. I suppose I might have struggled a bit on my own. It's a good thing King was here to help. Next time there's a major problem, I'll still be the first one on the scene. Super Alloy Darkshine had reclaimed his confidence. He struck a series of poses, flexed his restored muscles, and squatted slightly to show off his definition. Looking at his marble-carved, glistening black physique, he flashed a blindingly confident smile. No matter the crisis, I will face it head-on alongside my muscles. Humanity will always have the light of hope as long as my lats can carry it. Flashy Flash flicked the blood off his razor-sharp blade, his long golden hair fluttering as he maintained his cool, stoic expression. Monster or alien, I will take their heads with my blade. That is my path. It will never change. Throughout the entire war, Flashy Flash's record was undeniably the most impressive among the group. If he hadn't stalled the original Diamond Sperm alone for so long, the association might have fallen before King even arrived. Atomic Samurai stood nearby, chewing awkwardly on a toothpick. To be honest, looking back at the battle, aside from dicing up Führer Ugly, he hadn't done much. When Solar Sperm arrived, he had been one-shot before he could even blink. But seeing everyone else dropping cool lines, he grit his teeth, accidentally snapping his toothpick in half. No matter what comes, I stand with humanity. If a monster wants to harm our world, they'll have to ask my sword first. The other S-class heroes followed suit, each declaring their loyalty to humanity and the association, their voices filled with the resolve of protectors. King watched the scene quietly, a faint smile on his face. Beside him, the bald demon Saitama watched the hero's odes with his usual deadpan, slightly glazed-over eyes. Solar Sperm crouched on the ground, looking exactly like a submissive chihuahua, occasionally casting terrified glances at the two monsters standing silently nearby. What are these two gods thinking? Why are they so quiet? Don't tell me they're deciding which sauce to cook me with. Thinking this, Solar Sperm shuddered and subtly shuffled a few meters further away, terrified that his masters might decide on a whim to turn him into a midnight snack. Saitama turned his head toward the tall, blonde man. The things they say in their oaths are pretty unique to each of them. It matches my impression of what a hero should be. Hearing this, King nodded. He patted Saitama on the shoulder, his voice, usually calm and imposing, now carrying a hint of genuine warmth. Of course it matches. Because, after all, they are true heroes. 20 advanced chapters now available on Patreon. https://www.patreon.com/c/sega. Just remove the hyphen to access Patreon normally. If you like this novel, please consider leaving a review. That's helped the story a lot. Thank you. Chapter 173, Chapter 174, Happy New Year to everyone. 828 words. Chapter 174, Happy New Year to everyone. The disaster that had brought humanity to the brink of extinction was finally resolved by the Hero Association. To be more precise, it was settled by the intervention of the strongest man on Earth, King, and the recently meteoric One-Punch Man, Saitama. The Hero Association was not about to let such a monumental opportunity slip by. They immediately deployed their PR department to broadcast the details of the event to every corner of the globe. In an instant, the association's prestige reached unprecedented heights, effectively eclipsing the influence of the world government. The social obsession with the hero profession soared to a new level. The public began to worship top-tier heroes far more than any Hollywood celebrity or pop idol. Under the association's careful image crafting, King and the uniquely powerful Saitama became the ultimate national icons. Driven by public demand and the sheer weight of their contributions, the Hero Association executives decided to reorganize the S-Class rankings. King, formerly S-Class Rank 5, was officially promoted to S-Class Rank 1, finally overtaking Blast, who had held the top spot since the association's inception. Normally, the high-ranking officials wouldn't have dared to make such a drastic change. At most, they would have moved King to Rank 2, replacing Tatsumaki. The reason for this leap to the absolute summit was due to a personal endorsement from a very specific individual. The mysterious powerhouse himself, Blast, had returned from deep space with severe injuries and personally vouched for King. He praised King's horrific, godlike strength before the eyes of the world and publicly announced his decision to step down and cede his position to a more worthy successor. This revelation sent shockwaves through the internet. King's fame became a juggernaut. He completely left the former second-place popularity icon, Sweet Mask, in the dust. His approval rating was now in a league of its own and uncontested number 1. The world knew this legendary man had saved the planet. He was the one who stood between humanity and total annihilation. King was great. King was a savior. Meanwhile, Saitama, the One-Punch Man, was promoted to S-Class Rank 3, taking the spot formerly held by Silver Fong. As for why he wasn't placed at Rank 2, the executives had to consider things carefully. While Saitama's achievements were blindingly bright, Tatsumaki, Rank 2, had been the association's most diligent model worker for years and had played a vital role in the recent crisis. In terms of seniority and cumulative service, the executives felt Saitama should sit comfortably at Rank 3 for the time being. As Saitama's influence grew, observant citizens noticed a strange trend: the number of bald people on the streets was skyrocketing. These new baldies were predominantly young. While a hairless head used to be the sign of middle-aged male pattern baldness, it was now becoming the trendiest look for teenagers and young adults. They were all imitating Saitama's style, believing that being bald was cool and perhaps, if they shaved it all off, they could obtain power like the One-Punch Man. As time went on, Saitama, who had initially been thrilled by his massive salary hike, began to grow somber. He went from frequenting the streets to becoming a shut-in. Whenever he had to go out, he had to wear a variety of disguises and high-quality wigs, double-checking they wouldn't blow away in the wind. But even with such elaborate disguises, he was still frequently recognized. After all, his most iconic features weren't just his shiny head, but his perpetually deadpan eyes and his minimalist sketch face. Eventually, Saitama gave up on walking. Every time he needed groceries, he would simply launch himself from his doorstep in a massive leap, flying through the sky to avoid the swarms of fanatical fans. King's penthouse suite. King lay on his massive, plush bed, staring unblinkingly at the translucent blue data panel floating before him. "Congratulations, host, for successfully defeating God. inflicting heavy injuries, and driving him back to the high-dimensional realm. Option 1. Beat the god before you until he kneels. Let this self-proclaimed higher being from a higher dimension witness the true meaning of "there is always a sky beyond the sky." Show him what a limitless, adaptive superstat monster looks like. Status: completed. Rewards are being distributed. Congratulations! You have obtained System Item, True Warrior's Dual Scroll. Congratulations! You have obtained System Item, Dimensional Warp Gate. Ding! Congratulations, host! You have received a random ability upgrade. Adaptive nature has evolved into infinite evolution. But what? King sat up, his eyes wide. Even that broken ability got an upgrade? He stared at the notifications, his mind reeling. I really am a walking cheat code now, aren't I? 20 advanced chapters now available on Patreon. https://www.patreon.com/c/sega's. Just remove the hyphen to access Patreon normally. If you like this novel, please consider leaving a review. That's helped the story a lot, thank you. Chapter 174, Chapter 175, This is Beyond Badass. 1040 words. Chapter 175, This is Beyond Badass. King wasn't in a rush to check his newly evolved ability. Instead, he chose to prioritize the detailed descriptions of his two new items. In a situation that wasn't urgent, he preferred to do things in a systematic order. True Warrior's Dual Scroll. Upon activation, this scroll creates a forced, isolated dimension that cannot be disturbed or destroyed. It drags a selected target into this space for a True Warrior's Duel. The dimension only dissolves when one side dies or the initiator accepts the target's surrender. Special item effect: the selected target must be a single individual. However, the initiator's side can include 2 or more participants with no upper limit. Furthermore, escape is impossible until the duel concludes. This includes forms such as soul projection, subatomic particles, divine sense, or higher dimensional shifting. Current charges: 10 out of 10. King read the description and took a sharp breath. Isn't this just pure cheating? He had to admit, the name was incredibly misleading. It called itself a True Warrior's Duel, but the fine print revealed the truth. It wasn't a one-on-one, it was a you alone versus all of us scenario. And since the target couldn't escape even through dimensional shifting until the initiator accepted a surrender or they died, if I use this on God, escape would be impossible, and he could bring multiple allies in for a forced fair fight. Does that mean I can bring the bald demon Saitama with me, drag God into this arena, and have a righteous 2-on-1 beatdown? With his heart pounding in excitement, King clicked on the second system item. Dimensional Warp Gate, a door that allows for seamless travel between worlds and dimensions. It can lock onto coordinates across different planes. If a resonant coordinate exists, it can perform tracking teleportation. Special item effect: the dimensional warp gate is indestructible and cannot be disabled. Once placed, it establishes a one-way channel. Only the master of the gate and their designated allies can pass through. King stared fixedly at the translucent blue data panel, his eyes lingering on the details of the warp gate. A few seconds later, he laughed. His smile was no longer just amused, it radiated a sharp, rising killing intent. I'm coming for your head. The dimensional warp gate, combined with the True Warrior's Dual Scroll, meant he could not only pinpoint God's location in the higher dimensions but also force him into a cage match where he couldn't run. It seems the system really wants me to kill God. Every item it gives me is linked to slaying the deity in one way or another. Although he wondered why the system was so obsessed with obliterating God, King didn't dwell on it. The logic was simple: the foundation of his entire power set came from the system. There was no point in doubting his benefactor. Besides, through the system's general attitude, King had a vague guess about its true identity. Even if that guess wasn't 100% accurate, it was enough for him to piece together a bigger picture. Now then, let's see how my most broken skill has evolved. King opened his character status. Before checking the skills, he took a moment to admire the stats that were now so high they were blinding. Name: King. Gender: male. Abilities: King Engine, Extreme Regeneration, Precision Control, Energy Mastery, Soul Indestructibility, Infinite Evolution. Strength: 200,000. Speed: 200,000. Stamina: 200,000. Defense: 200,000. Spirit: 200,000. Note: the threshold for dragon level is 1000 in all stats. System remark: you are now truly invincible within the One Punch Man world. Even Saitama must assume a serious attitude when fighting you. There is only one terrifying enemy left for you in this world. What a beautiful sight. These numbers make me want to start laughing like a proper villain. Indeed, King's stats were now a flat 200,000 across the board. Compared to when he first transmigrated, his stats had increased nearly 20-fold. This was the result of his constant adaptation, effectively, a perfect evolution of his physical vessel. During his war with God, in order to suppress the deity, King's body had constantly evolved to maintain a state where he could crush his opponent. Under the pressure of that struggle, his power had scaled up relentlessly. To evolve a body capable of perfectly meeting that level of combat, his stats had to become all-around flawless. Under the divine power of the old, adaptive nature, King had finally evolved into this 200,000-point stat monster. His spirit stat, which had always lagged behind, had finally caught up with the rest of the pack. Attribute points weren't just simple addition, they were multiplicative in their effectiveness. For example, a baseline dragon-level monster averaged 1,000 points. When King first arrived with the 8th gate, he had roughly 10,000. Could 10 dragon-level failures beat that version of King? Absolutely not. And if current King fought that version of himself? Current King wouldn't even need to move. The old King would just shatter into a red mist upon contact with his current passive aura. After admiring his badass numbers, King reluctantly moved his gaze to the skill bar to check the newly evolved Infinite Evolution. Infinite Evolution, you possess unimaginable potential. Whenever you face oppression, are struck by an external force, or experience internal agony and psychological pain, you will continuously evolve. You will grow until you shatter everything in your path, rocketing through stages of evolution until you reach the pinnacle of the multiverse. Holy SHT? Asterisk. After reading the description, even the usually stoic King lost his composure. His eyes went wide with shock. He rubbed his eyes to make sure he hadn't misread it. His brain felt like it was buzzing. This skill became this strong? King had previously considered adaptive nature to be the most disgusting and broken skill in his arsenal. But this evolved version, Infinite Evolution, was in a league of its own. It was the ultimate cheat code among cheat codes. Just look at that description, it's beyond badass. 20 advanced chapters now available on Patreon. https://www.patreon.com/c/sega's. Just remove the hyphen to access Patreon normally. If you like this novel, please consider leaving a review. That's helped the story a lot. Thank you. Chapter 175, Chapter 176, another rematch? 965 words. Chapter 176, another rematch? Everything was now in place. The 2 items specialized for taking down God were in his inventory, and he had secured a skill that defied the very laws of reality. But even so, King did not intend to set out immediately to find the deity. During their previous clash, King had planted a soul mark on God. Even now, he could feel a faint, ethereal connection to the entity's location. With the newly acquired, dimensional warp gate, he could use that connection to lock onto God's coordinates regardless of the distance or dimension. There was no rush to hunt him down. Since being ruthlessly suppressed after his arrogant entry into the altar last time, King had become significantly more cautious. Until he was 100% certain that he could effortlessly crush the opponent, King would not make his move. Now then. It's time to grind those stats even higher. Even though his base attributes had reached a staggering 200,000 across the board, King felt it wasn't enough. God was a high-dimensional being, an invader of worlds, and the higher dimensions were his home turf. King decided that until his numbers reached a level where no one could ever hope to challenge him, he wouldn't pull the trigger on the final operation. What? In his somewhat messy apartment, Saitama's hand moved with practiced precision, swishing a slice of premium Wagyu beef through the boiling broth. The beef had changed color, turning from a raw pink to a tender light brown, releasing a mouth-watering aroma and wisps of steam. Saitama looked at his prize with satisfaction. He had timed it perfectly, 7 seconds in the boiling soup to ensure it was at its most tender and succulent state. This was absolute perfection. Saitama inhaled the beef and let out a moan of pure bliss. After savoring the flavor for a moment, he turned back to King. "Are you serious, King? If I beat you, you'll cover my grocery bills for a whole year? And I can buy any game on the market, and you'll foot the bill for everything?" Just minutes ago, Saitama had been preparing a solo hotpot feast to celebrate his massive salary raise. But the moment the meat hit the water, King had appeared out of nowhere like a ghost. His indulgent solo meal had instantly become a shared dinner. Saitama had originally felt a tiny bit of sorrow about sharing his beef, but upon hearing King's proposal, his depression vanished instantly. Facing Saitama's excited interrogation, King nodded with a smile. His majestic, domineering face softened with a hint of amusement. "Of course. If you can defeat me, everything you just said becomes a reality. As long as money can solve it, I'll handle it for you. But there's one condition, Saitama. You have to actually beat me. Say no more." Saitama devoured the rest of the beef like a whirlwind and stood up, his voice booming with motivation. To be able to experience the joy of battle with his best friend and get a massive windfall of gifts? This was a double win. I win twice. Seeing Saitama agree so quickly, King looked completely unruffled. He had never doubted the outcome of this negotiation. A person like the bald demon, who craved the thrill of combat and lived a relatively frugal life, could never refuse a deal that offered both spiritual and material satisfaction. Saitama stripped off his loungewear and flashed into his iconic mustard yellow hero suit. His white cape snapped as it caught the air, and his shiny bald head caught the light like a polished jewel. "Are we heading to the outskirts right now? I'm telling you, King, I'm definitely winning this bet." King shook his head, a slight smirk playing on his lips. No. We aren't fighting on Earth. Our power levels are too high now. Earth wouldn't survive being our playground. I've invited a special guest today. He can take us to a suitable battlefield and act as our referee. In the next second, a silver light flashed beside King. A middle-aged man in a white battlesuit, sporting a bit of stubble and a weary but friendly grin, appeared. "Hello there. I've heard much about you. The legendary and mysterious One Punch Man. It's an honor to meet you in person. Who are you?" Saitama looked confused. "Is this middle-aged Chunibyu uncle the referee?" Blast froze for a second. He hadn't expected One Punch Man to have no idea who he was. That's not right. According to Blast's memory, he had just given a televised speech to the entire world, specifically mentioning both King and One Punch Man. And yet, the One Punch Man himself didn't recognize him? But Blast was a veteran who had seen it all. He quickly recovered and extended a hand with a confident smile. "Let's get acquainted then, Mr. My name is Blast. I was the former S-Class Rank 1, though your friend Mr. King has taken that spot now." "Oh. Okay." The three of them chatted casually for a bit. Finally, Blast rolled his shoulders, his expression turning solemn and focused. "Gentlemen, I am going to teleport you to a location roughly 1 light-year away from Earth. It's a massive asteroid belt filled with planetary debris. The rest is up to you. I will act as referee from a nearby moon. Let's go." Blast let out a sharp cry. Dazzling silver light erupted from his body as spatial fluctuations rapidly expanded, enveloping the three of them in a blinding shroud. 20 advanced chapters now available on Patreon. https://www.patreon.com/c/sega's. Just remove the hyphen to access Patreon normally. If you like this novel, please consider leaving a review. That's helped the story a lot. Thank you. Chapter 176, Chapter 177, Serious Punch. 1,223 words. Chapter 177, Serious Punch. In the deep reaches of the cosmos, countless asteroids drifted according to the cold laws of physics, forming a vast, shimmering belt of planetary debris. With a sudden flash of silver light, three figures appeared in the center of the void. Saitama was about to speak, but he suddenly frowned and pinched his nose, looking confused. Oh, wait. I almost forgot. There's no air in space. How are we supposed to fight if I'm holding my breath the whole time? Hearing this, Blast and King looked at each other. For a moment, neither knew how to respond. Blast's face was a mask of pure shock. He stared at Saitama, his eyes wide behind his goggles. This was the first time he had witnessed such an absolute disregard for the laws of reality. In contrast to the bewildered Blast, King had long since grown accustomed to the bald demon's logic-defying nature. He remained perfectly calm. Saitama had forgotten the basic fact that sound cannot travel through a vacuum, yet because he only remembered that he couldn't breathe, he had simply started talking. His voice echoed clearly and crisply through the void of space. King spoke up, his tone carrying a hint of playful teasing. Actually, Saitama, didn't you know? According to the latest scientific studies, bald people are actually capable of breathing in space. Eh? How come I never saw that on the news? Saitama looked skeptical for a second, then released his nose. He took a huge, experimental gulp of cosmic radiation. When he realized he didn't instantly suffocate, a look of pure joy spread across his face. Man, you should have told me earlier. I didn't know losing my hair came with perks like this. Saitama didn't doubt King's words for a second. King was his best friend, why would he lie? And so, believing this new scientific fact, Saitama convinced himself that he truly didn't need oxygen. Watching Saitama strike a freestyle swimming pose in the vacuum, talking and moving as if he were still on Earth without the need for a medium or oxygen, Blast was shocked for the 100th time today. Is Saitama always this ridiculous? His body, it can't even be classified as human anymore. King shrugged non-committally. He grabbed Blast by the shoulder and tossed him toward a region outside the asteroid belt. Don't worry about it. At least he still looks human. That's enough for now. Blast, floating away through the void from the impact of the toss, was speechless. Bro, you could have just told me to teleport away. Why do you have to keep throwing me like a sack of potatoes? Blast stabilized himself using his spatial powers, appearing on a large, drifting asteroid in the distance. He looked back at the two men, raised his hand high, and brought it down sharply. His voice, carried by spatial energy, reached their ears. I declare the duel. Start. The moment the words fell, an asteroid several kilometers wide was launched at breakneck speed, arriving in front of Saitama in a heartbeat. Saitama threw a plain, unadorned punch. The massive rock shattered into a million tiny fragments instantly. Driven by his desire for premium hot pot and new games, Saitama shot forward. He closed the distance to King in a blink, raising his fist high. Normal punch. King's danger sense flared. He didn't hesitate to counter. The two fists collided in midair. An invisible shockwave erupted from the point of impact. The surrounding asteroids were pulverized into dust in an instant. The violent pressure caused the very fabric of space to tremble. This time, their fists were locked in a stalemate. Neither could push the other back. But in the very next microsecond, King's eyes sharpened. He increased his output. Something shocking happened. Saitama was blasted backward. He tumbled through the stars for several rotations before coming to a stop. Saitama looked at his slightly smoking fist, then at King, who was standing in the distance with his arms crossed, looking perfectly composed. A fire ignited in the bald demon's eyes. You've gotten so much stronger. That was amazing. The words had barely left his lips when Saitama charged again. This time, his expression grew serious. He raised his right hand and clenched his fingers. Suddenly, 1,000 red fist shadows rained down like a relentless storm. Each punch carried unrivaled destructive force, forming an impenetrable wall of kinetic energy that threatened to shatter reality itself. Consecutive normal punches. King responded in kind. He strode forward, his footfall shattering the void beneath him. Berserk power erupted from his body as a vast ocean of aura wreathed his fists. In an instant, his originally crimson aura underwent a mysterious transformation, turning into a blinding, radiant gold. His fists shone like two miniature suns. Imperial Fist. Thousands of fists collided. Each impact caused the space around them to buckle. If they weren't in an empty asteroid belt, the residual shockwaves from this exchange alone would have wiped Earth off the map. Even so, the area for hundreds of kilometers around them was turned into a total vacuum. The massive asteroids were reduced to fine cosmic grit by the aftershocks of their duel. They traded blow for blow. Every punch Saitama threw was perfectly caught or parried by King, while King's imperial fists were tanked by Saitama's indestructible body. Realizing that Saitama's current normal output was actually slightly weaker than his own current state, King finally understood his new baseline. With 200,000 points in every attribute, King's base form now surpassed the non-evolved, non-serious state of Saitama. It seems I've finally reached the same ballpark as the bald demon. Thinking back to his previous fight with Saitama, where he was chased around like a dog for the entire match, King felt like laughing. He was no longer that weak, struggling survivor. With that thought, King's punching speed accelerated. Countless golden flashes flickered in the void. Each burst released a horrific level of force, enough to reduce 10-kilometer-wide asteroids to powder. As the frantic exchange continued, Saitama's excitement reached a fever pitch. The dull, lifeless look in his eyes was gone, replaced by the sheer joy of finally finding a rival. I really didn't expect that King had become this powerful. Truly worthy of being my best friend. Facing a powerhouse who could trade blows with him for this long without falling, Saitama felt he had to show proper respect. He had to be truly serious, rather than fighting with the testing, playful attitude he had used until now. In a split second, Saitama's round face became sharp and angular. His eyes turned focused and lethal. Veins bulged on his arms as a power beyond comprehension began to swell within his human frame. King, currently trading blows with Saitama, suddenly felt the atmosphere change. His pupils constricted instinctively as a massive, overwhelming sense of danger flooded his soul. Serious series. Amidst the thousands of consecutive normal punches, Saitama's gaze turned cold as ice. His serious fist, carrying a pressure that felt like the collapse of a universe, smashed forward. 20 advanced chapters now available on Patreon. https://www.patreon.com/c/sega's. Just remove the hyphen to access Patreon normally. If you like this novel, please consider leaving a review. That's helped the story a lot, thank you. Chapter 177, Chapter 178, Gate of Death, Open. 749 words. Chapter 178, Gate of Death, Open. Looking at Saitama's suddenly sharp, angular face and the overwhelming sense of crisis flooding his heart, King realized instantly, this was no feint. This was a serious punch. Perfect. I wanted to test this anyway. I want to see if my base form can withstand a serious punch. King had already tested the normal series. Even the consecutive normal punches had been handled with relative ease. It was safe to say that King's current base state already eclipsed the non-evolved, casual version of the bald demon. This made sense. In the original story, Saitama in his base form couldn't even kill Cosmic Garou with a direct hit. Before his exponential growth kicked in, that version of Saitama was definitely weaker than the current King. Facing the coming storm, King didn't hesitate. He raised his fist high, a blinding golden light erupting from his knuckles like a localized sun. Imperial Fist. The two fists collided in the silence of the void. In an instant, the heavens changed color. An unparalleled energy storm spiraled outward from their point of impact. With no atmosphere to dampen the force, the energy expanded at a terrifying rate, blanketing 1,000 kilometers in a heartbeat. Countless massive asteroids were caught in the wake and pulverized into subatomic dust. King was launched backward, a blurred streak of motion, until he slammed into a distant, drifting moonlet. He looked down at his left arm, which was currently dangling uselessly at his side. His expression remained stoic despite the damage. "It seems, my base form still isn't enough to trade blows with the Sirius series." King's right arm had suffered a total comminuted fracture. The bones inside were crushed into a powder as fine as the sugar on a rice cracker. Compared to his earlier state, where a serious punch would have turned him into a cloud of red mist, King's durability had improved massively. Now, taking a direct hit only cost him a limb. But the most important factor was this: King still hadn't used his full power. Green light flickered across his skin. The mangled, twisted arm snapped back into its original shape, healed instantly. A warm current welled up from deep within his cells, flowing through his limbs and bones, constantly reinforcing his frame. His stats were steadily climbing. Since that's the case. 8 inner gates, 8th gate of death open. His life force exploded outward in a violent surge. Crimson steam billowed from every pore, and King's presence skyrocketed. The sheer weight of his pressure caused the space around him to tremble and distort uncontrollably. The dark, silent starry sky was stained a deep, pulsing blood red in an instant. His solidified aura filled the sector, effectively transforming the surrounding space into King's personal domain. Sensing the staggering weight of the new aura, a smile finally spread across Saitama's serious face. His white cape snapped violently in the wind of King's energy. "That's quite the aura, King. You really are something else. I guess I have to get a little more serious too." King and Saitama looked at each other. No more words were needed. Everything was understood in that single gaze. Between the strong, there is mutual respect. When a warrior climbs the highest peak, he first feels the rush of achievement, followed quickly by the freezing wind of solitude. It is a loneliness born of being the only one at the summit. That loneliness only grows as he looks down and sees that no one else can even reach the foothills. But in this moment, as he turned his head and saw another standing on an equal peak across from him, the joy was enough to drive him mad. Both figures shot forward simultaneously. A yellow streak and a red streak collided in the void. Sirius series, omnidirectional Sirius punch. Saitama kicked off the vacuum. His figure began to flicker and weave through the stars, teleporting tens of thousands of times in a single heartbeat, leaving a trail of high-velocity afterimages around King. These weren't mere phantoms. In the split second each afterimage was left behind, a fully charged Sirius punch was unleashed. In the next heartbeat, thousands upon thousands of Sirius punches rained down on King from every conceivable angle. 20 advanced chapters now available on Patreon. https://www.patreon.com/c/sega's. Just remove the hyphen to access Patreon normally. If you like this novel, please consider leaving a review. That's helped the story a lot, thank you. Chapter 178, Chapter 179, Are These Two Even Human? 1081 words. Chapter 179, Are These Two Even Human? The ultimate sense of crisis exploded in an instant. Every single strike was a serious punch. So this was the bald demon's most powerful technique, omnidirectional Sirius beatdown. Despite the frantic alarm screaming from the depths of his soul, King's face showed no hint of fear. Instead, a savage, exhilarated grin spread across his features. The stronger the attack, the better. The more you hit me, the faster I evolve. His excitement reached a fever pitch as his aura began to surge and swirl, becoming increasingly violent and brilliant. Wreathed in crimson steam, King unleashed thousands of punches in a single heartbeat, meeting every one of Saitama's Sirius punches with pinpoint accuracy. Seeing King launch such a resolute counteroffensive, every one of Saitama's high-speed afterimages seemed to smile in unison, a smile filled with pure satisfaction and warrior's respect. This is it. Enjoy the peak of combat. Deafening roars erupted from the collision of their sheer power, echoing through the dark, lonely void. The space surrounding them began to spiderweb with cracks before shattering completely into 1,000 jagged shards. The berserk shockwaves swept through the sector with unrivaled majesty. Even a star the size of the sun would have been pulverized by the raw, concentrated force of their exchange. As countless spatial rifts manifested, rivers of silver spatial chaos began to pour out. This silver tide, capable of annihilating reality, descended upon the battlefield. A normal person would have fled in terror, even a god-tier being would approach such spatial turbulence with extreme caution. Yet, the moment the silver chaos appeared, it was instantly vaporized, reduced back into basic subatomic energy particles by the mere proximity of King and Saitama's power. Tens of millions of kilometers away. Blast watched the scene from afar, his scalp tingling with a chill he hadn't felt in eons. He wasn't watching with his naked eyes. He had used his spatial power to condense a screen of light, live-streaming the battle between King and Saitama. But in the next heartbeat, the spatial screen began to flicker violently before twisting and shattering into nothingness. The space in that entire sector has been completely torn apart. My spatial energy can't even penetrate the energy field they've created. Blast's expression turned grim. He knew Saitama and King were powerful, but the performance they were putting on right now far surpassed any God's Chosen he had ever encountered in his years of guarding the dimensions. Actually, forget the Chosen. These guys even beat the hell out of God himself. Just who or what are these two? This question haunted Blast. He had guarded the Earth in silence for decades, yet he had never heard the names of these two titans until recently. If they had been this powerful before, they should have been detected by his sensors long ago. Upon returning to Earth recently, Blast had used his high-level S-Class Rank 1 authority to scour the records for everything regarding King and Saitama's lives before they joined the association. To his shock, he found that before their debut, both names were effectively invisible. Their resumes were suspiciously ordinary. Saitama's record claimed he was a generic salaryman who had been laid off. Nothing special. King's record was just as mundane, an otaku who lived a quiet, secluded life. Neither had ever shown even a hint of this level of power. Could it be that before they decided to become heroes, they were both hidden masters who just wanted to live in peace? Blast felt his theory was 90% correct. After all, how else could someone go from being a regular human to an unobservable cosmic horror in just 3 years? But seriously, these two are just ridiculous. He didn't even need his spatial screen anymore. Blast simply looked up. In the distant starry sky, blinding bursts of energy ripples were visible to the naked eye. Stars in that region were winking out one by one. The brilliant starlight was being snuffed out by the sheer collision of their energy. From Blast's perspective, the Milky Way looked like it had been scooped out by a giant spoon. The sector where King and Saitama were fighting had been turned into a total, absolute vacuum. Suddenly, he felt a violent shockwave crossing the tens of millions of kilometers, slamming into his position. Blast lost his cool. What the hell? Are you two even human? Without hesitation, Blast triggered his spatial powers. Dozens of spatial barriers stacked in front of him while numerous warp portals manifested around his body. The shockwave arrived and shattered dozens of high-density spatial shields like they were made of paper, continuing forward with unrivaled momentum. Veins bulged on Blast's forehead as he used every ounce of his strength to redirect the incoming energy into his portals, dumping it into a far-off, empty dimension. Those two are absolute freaks. It seemed his decision to step down was the right one. I'm just an old relic being left behind by the era. The new age needs the youth to protect it. Blast crossed his arms, floating in the vast cosmos. Behind his yellow goggles, his eyes watched the distant, roaring destruction with a look of genuine relief and pride. He never regretted giving up his rank 1 spot. Before the Hero Association even existed, Blast had been traveling the world, performing deeds of justice and laying the foundation for the current human society. He wanted humanity to grow, to become great enough to overcome any obstacle. If it's these two, maybe the threat of God can be resolved permanently. Maybe he won't be able to invade Earth ever again. As a warrior who had fought God for years, Blast knew that King driving him out of the Earth's orbit didn't mean the plan was dead. God was a high-dimensional being. He was undoubtedly in the higher realms, healing his wounds and waiting for a moment of weakness to return. The space in that sector seems to be stabilizing. Lost in thought, Blast noticed the spatial fluctuations in the distance were resetting. He snapped back to focus. He couldn't forget his current job, acting as the referee for these two monsters. 20 advanced chapters now available on Patreon. https://www.patreon.com/c/sega's. Just remove the hyphen to access Patreon normally. If you like this novel, please consider leaving a review. That's helped the story a lot. Thank you. Chapter 179, Chapter 180, The Ultimate Contest of Power. 995 words. Chapter 180, The Ultimate Contest of Power. Blast raised his hand, and spatial energy surged instantly. He attempted to manipulate the fabric of space where Saitama and King were fighting, hoping to project the visual data onto a screen of light. However, in the very next heartbeat, a violent wave of backlash hit him. The spatial screen before his eyes detonated into a shower of raw energy particles. Blast himself suffered a significant spiritual rebound. It felt as if the sheer magnitude of the energy from that distant battlefield had used his own screen as a conduit to strike him directly. Blood leaked from the corner of his mouth. Oi, this is getting a little too ridiculous, isn't it? Blast muttered a shocked complaint, while offering a silent apology in his heart. Sorry, King. I can't be your referee anymore. In my current state, I've lost even the right to be a spectator. Anyone who knows me thinks I'm Blast, the protector of Earth. Anyone who doesn't probably thinks I'm just out here cosplaying as space junk. Thinking about how he didn't even qualify as dust compared to the two titans fighting in the distance, he felt a wave of helplessness. We're all technically human, how is the gap this wide? In Blast's view, the distance between himself and the bottom-ranked S-class heroes was already a vast canyon, wider than the gap between a hero and a civilian. But now, compared to Saitama and King, the difference felt like comparing a human being to a paramecium. At the center of the void, everything was silent. Everything was dead. The spatial turbulence continued to pour out like a torrential river, silver tides of chaos carrying the power to annihilate reality. Yet, in the very heart of this chaotic ocean, there existed a vacuum zone nearly 10 kilometers wide. In that zone, all laws of physics had ceased to function. Even space itself seemed not to exist. It was a domain constructed entirely by two forces of absolute, infinite magnitude. Saitama and King were past the point of testing each other. They were seeing red. Every punch and kick was a raw, primal display of physical violence. Currently, every single one of the bald demon's strikes was a serious punch at his current peak, strikes far more powerful than the one that had parted the clouds of Earth in the original records. There were no flashy energy beams. No blinding special effects. There was only the most extreme contest of raw strength. Saitama didn't need to follow rules, he was the rule. King didn't need to follow rules either, his disgusting, infinite evolution was his license to ignore reality. A fist blurred through the void. Saitama didn't dodge, he took the blow squarely to the face. The power behind the hit was enough to make even the invincible Saitama feel a sharp spike of pain. A trickle of crimson blood began to leak from his nose. He wiped his face, staring at the red stain on his glove. The excitement on his face was so intense it was practically manic. It's been a long time since I've seen my own blood. 3 years, this is the first time. I'm really grateful to you, King. As he spoke, Saitama's surging emotions caused the power within him to skyrocket. His aura intensified several times over in a split second. King's pupils constricted. Before he could even twitch, Saitama's clenched fist slammed into his face. The crisp sound of bone shattering echoed. After his most recent power-up, the force behind the bald demon's fist had become horrific. A single hit pulverized half of King's skull on impact. Extreme regeneration and infinite evolution triggered instantly. Amidst a dual flash of green and white light, King's face was restored to perfection in an instant. Not only that, but the aura radiating from him grew even more ferocious. Hearing Saitama's words, King smiled. Though on his domineering, majestic face, a smile always looked a bit stiff and intimidating. You're grateful to me? I feel the same way. We're best friends, after all, Saitama. The two warriors, who acknowledged each other as equals and friends, locked eyes. No more words were needed. They raised their fists simultaneously. Everything was understood. In this true warriors' arena constructed from their own clashing energies, the shockwaves no longer dissipated into the distance. Instead, they were trapped within the zone, bouncing back and forth, intensifying the pressure within the arena. The speed of their punching was beyond measure. To a normal observer, their movements would appear relatively static because they were moving so fast the human brain couldn't process the frames. King's fist smashed into Saitama's nose, making blood spray and cracking the bridge of his bone. But the bald demon was a freak of nature. His injuries would mysteriously vanish in an instant. Even he didn't know why, he was just a walking cheat code. And as he took damage, Saitama's fighting spirit soared higher, and his strength began a frantic, exponential climb. The empowered Saitama threw a counterpunch that literally bored a hole through King's cranium. King's bloodshot eyeballs were sent flying into the void. But the synchronized activation of King's two passive skills didn't just heal him, it evolved him. Extreme regeneration gave him the sustain to stay in the fight indefinitely. Infinite evolution allowed him to match the pace of Saitama's legendary growth. King hadn't realized how broken this passive was at first, but he did now. When an empowered Saitama landed a punch, the moment the damage was dealt, Infinite Evolution calculated the new power level and boosted King's own physical durability and strength to match that exact tier. In the original story, Cosmic Garou tried to copy Saitama's strength, but he couldn't grow as fast as the bald demon. He was always one step behind. Both of them were powering up in perfect synchronization. Chapter 180, Chapter 181, Fireworks Made of Planets. 1402 words. Chapter 181, Fireworks Made of Planets. King threw another punch, but this time it didn't land on Saitama's face. Instead, Saitama caught his wrist in a death grip. Got you. Saitama's aura spiked again. He squeezed King's captured wrist until the bones creaked and groaned. Then, reaching out with his other hand, he grabbed King's head and slammed it forward. Veins bulged on Saitama's arms as every muscle fiber exploded with berserk power. Pinning King by the face, he launched a full-throttle charge. With the crisp sound of glass shattering, the duo smashed right through the fabric of reality, tumbling out of the surface space and into the chaotic tides of the dimensional turbulence. Swept by the silver ocean of spatial currents, King violently snapped his own trapped wrist to break the grip. Under his control, the severed hand reattached and healed in the next second. The two resumed their exchange of blows. However, the battlefield was no longer the starry sky of the physical universe, but the deep, unstable layers of spacetime. This was the core of the universe. Normal planets and galaxies existed only in the surface space. Only those with enough power to tear reality apart could reach this deep dimension filled with spatial storms. Every wisp of this dimensional turbulence carried enough energy to annihilate a world. Even a god-level monster wouldn't dare touch it carelessly, for fear of being shredded instantly. Yet, within this vast, silver ocean of chaos, two figures flickered and collided. Every punch sent the spatial tides into a frenzy, every strike shattered the currents around them. King caught one of Saitama's fists and countered with a vicious, heavy elbow strike aimed directly at Saitama's jewels. A faint sound of something cracking echoed through the void. Saitama's eyes widened to the size of dinner plates, and veins throbbed on his shiny bald head. Grimacing in pure agony, Saitama reflexively extended two fingers, stabbing them toward King's face. Just as King prepared to dodge, he felt a sudden weight on his head. Two palms had clamped onto the sides of his skull, pinning him in place. King froze. Even as he tried to struggle, his brain stalled. If I remember correctly, Saitama is using one hand to poke my eyes, and two other hands to hold my head. Where the hell did the third hand come from? King looked closely and realized that from behind Saitama's back, an arm seemingly composed of pure energy had materialized. And it wasn't just one, there were 4 extra arms. Saitama's fingers didn't hesitate, plunging straight into King's eye sockets. The eyeballs burst instantly, and crimson blood sprayed into the silver void. King didn't care about such a minor injury. He shook his head, and a new pair of eyes grew back in a blink. He looked at Saitama with genuine curiosity. "Saitama, how did you grow 4 extra arms?" Saitama looked a bit confused himself. He subconsciously clenched his 6 fists, and the energy arms behind him mirrored the motion perfectly. "I don't know. I just felt like I didn't have enough hands to trade punches with you. I thought about it really hard, and then these 4 extra arms just popped out. They look like energy, don't they?" "King. I guess when you are the rules of the universe, logic is optional." King realized that no matter how many impossible things the bald demon did, he shouldn't be surprised anymore. But he wasn't going to let Saitama have all the fun. Time to innovate. With that thought, King triggered his energy mastery. Dozens of golden arms began to manifest behind him. He radiated a brilliant, divine light, looking like a multi-armed deity descended from the heavens. This time, it was the bald demon's turn to be stunned. Saitama's face went deadpan as he pointed at the halo of arms behind King. "Yours are way more excessive than mine." After a brief round of mutual roasting, the two charged again, initiating a new cycle of carnage. In the deepest layers of space, 2 demonic silhouettes traded blows. Everywhere they passed, they left behind persistent energy fields that refused to dissipate. If the spatial turbulence here was an ocean, a single drop splashed from their clash would be enough to one-shot meteoric burst Boros. Any being below god level didn't even have the right to stand on this battlefield. King finally saw an opening. He grabbed the bald demon by the wrist and, with a violent burst of speed, flew upward, dragging Saitama's round head through the dimensional barrier. The sound of reality breaking echoed as the 2 streaks of light smashed through the silver tides, tore through the surface space, and returned to the vast, open starry sky. King's penthouse suite. King-sensei hasn't been home for 6 hours. As his top disciple, I must ensure his home is perfectly prepared for his return. Inside the massive villa, a young man with short blonde hair and an apron muttered to himself, his hands moving in a blur as he washed the dishes. Though he looked human at a glance, he was entirely mechanical. This was Genos. He had been staying at King's place lately, handling every chore with surgical precision. Even King had to admit that Genos was the most efficient unpaid mechanical intern in history. Sometimes, Genos didn't even wait for an order, he simply anticipated King's needs and finished the work before being asked. Grocery shopping, cooking, cleaning, laundry, dishwashing, he was a master of them all. Cosino had intended to build Genos into a combat-type cyborg, and that had been Genos' original goal as well. But since meeting King, the level of combat Genos witnessed was so high that if he even grazed a stray shockwave, he'd be reduced to spare parts. Out of necessity, he had evolved into the ultimate domestic assistant. But Genos enjoyed it. In his mind, managing his master's logistics was a vital part of his hero training. He believed that by observing the lifestyle of the strongest man, he could find the path to true power. Essentially, he had become a hardcore fanboy with a mechanical brain. Drying the last bowl, Genos untied his apron and sat down primly on the sofa, staring at the front door. King-sensei went out with Mr. Saitama a while ago. I don't know what they're doing, but they're probably just playing video games. After all, they are such good friends. It's not like they'd be out there beating each other to death or anything. Deep space. Saitama's face twisted as a powerful punch landed on his jaw, sending blood spraying from his mouth. He tumbled backward uncontrollably, smashing into a small planetoid orbiting nearby. King chased after him without a second's delay, appearing as a red streak of light diving toward the planet. The moment he landed, the crust began to buckle and shatter. Spiderweb cracks spread across the surface with manic intensity, and magma geysered from the broken ground. Saitama patted the dust off himself and wiped the blood from his face. His fighting spirit hadn't dampened, if anything, he looked more exhilarated than ever. Incredible! I haven't felt this good in years. Again! Saitama was truly having fun. Ever since he went bald and became invincible, no one had been able to give him a real fight while he was in a serious state. But now, it was different. His best friend, King, the man called the strongest on Earth, was actually matching him blow for blow. Occasionally, King even managed to suppress him. This is the best. A crimson blur flashed in his vision. King's cold, focused face appeared in his retinas, accompanied by a fist wreathed in berserk vitality. Bring it on! Saitama laughed heartily. He raised his fist high, veins bulging on his arm. Serious series, super serious punch. The two fists collided. The universe itself seemed to lose its voice. Then came an unparalleled explosion. A horrific shockwave of energy swept in all directions instantly. The planet beneath them didn't even last a second. Its core was pulverized instantly by the magnitude of the force. The planet turned into a firework display in the vast, silent void of space. Blinding fires swallowed the darkness. Within the inferno, one could still vaguely see a yellow streak and a red streak, clashing over and over. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Novels Wonderland.